Step into the darkness with witness shadows. Every shadow has a witness, and every witness has a story they've been too afraid to tell. Welcome to Witness Shadows, your ultimate destination for true horror stories and disturbing stories that linger long after the screen goes black. Whether you're looking for scary stories to sleep to, or chilling stalking stories that make you double-check your locks, our collection of true stories is curated to haunt your subconscious. I heard a whistle in the woods. Then something inside answered it with my voice. This happened in late October, not long after the clocks changed, when the afternoons in Cumbria start dying early and everything seems to go dark before you've properly realized the day's gone. I'd had a rough few weeks at work and was in one of those moods where staying indoors felt worse than driving somewhere bleak and pretending a night in the woods would somehow reset my head. That was always my thinking back then. If life felt cluttered, I'd throw a rucksack in the boot, pick a quiet bit of countryside, and disappear for a night. I'd done it enough times that I trusted myself in places most people wouldn't. That's probably the reason I ended up where I did. You get too comfortable being alone, and you stop treating your own instincts like warnings. You start treating them like nerves. The place was called Blackwater Fell, or at least that's what it showed up as on the old forestry map I had saved on my phone. It wasn't a proper campsite, more a stretch of managed woodland and rough open ground on the edge of an old reservoir basin that had been partly drained years ago. I'd heard of people fishing there, sometimes wild camping if they were careful, but it wasn't one of those spots with signposts and neatly laid gravel and families in windbreakers making tea from flasks. It was the sort of place you only end up if you mean to. I left just after lunch from my flat outside Kendall, stopped for petrol and a meal deal I never finished, and spent most of the drive telling myself it would do me good to get some quiet. Funny that. Quiet was exactly what I thought I wanted. By the time I got off the main road and onto the forestry lane, the light had already started thinning out. It wasn't dark yet, but that weak, colorless late autumn light had settled over everything. The pines on either side of the track looked nearly black at the base, and the higher branches were catching what little gray sky was left. The road was rough, puddled out in places, and scattered with needles and broken twigs. There were no other cars for miles, no dog walkers, no cyclists, nothing. Just long stretches of wet track and the sound of grit under my tires. I remember turning the heater down and cracking the window slightly because the inside of the car had gone too warm and stuffy, and the air that came in smelled like wet bark and peat. Cold enough to make you feel awake. Cold enough that it ought to have felt fresh. Instead, it made the whole place feel abandoned. I reached the old barrier at the edge of the forestry road a little after 4:30. It was just a rusting metal arm pushed open years ago and left that way, with a weathered sign beside it warning against fly tipping and unauthorized vehicles. I pulled up on the hard-packed verge, killed the engine, and for a second just sat there with both hands still on the wheel, listening. Nothing. No breeze worth mentioning. No bird calls. No movement in the trees. I honestly thought at first that the silence was what was bothering me, because proper woodland never really goes fully quiet. There's always something. Branches knocking, crows, distant traffic, water, even just that low constant hiss of wind moving somewhere above you. But there was almost none of that, just the cooling tick of my engine and my own breathing. That was when I noticed the other car. It was parked further up on the verge, angled slightly wrong like it hadn't been left carefully. A dark hatchback, muddy along the lower panels, driver's door standing open. Not wide open, just enough that I could see the inside light had come on and then died. The first thing I thought was that someone had broken down and gone for signal. The second thing I thought was that it didn't make sense because there wasn't enough room for another car to have passed it without pulling partly into the ditch, and the tire marks in the mud suggested it had come in and stayed there. No fresh footprints around my side of the verge either. I got out, shut my door quietly for some reason I still can't explain, and stood looking at it. The lane ahead disappeared between the trees, and the air felt strangely flat, as though the place was holding its breath. I should say now that I'm not one of those people who start panicking the second something looks a bit off. At the time, I still thought there had to be a boring explanation. Someone parked badly. Someone had gone for help. Someone was off in the trees having a piss and would come back embarrassed to find me staring at their car. I actually almost called out, just a normal, "You all right?" sort of thing. But something about the open door put me off. It wasn't dramatic, nothing cinematic. It was just wrong, too still, too deliberate looking, like it had been left that way in a hurry. I walked a little closer, not right up to it, just enough to see into the front. There was a paper coffee cup in the holder, a fleece on the passenger seat, and mud on the sill where someone had stepped out. On the inside of the driver's door, just below the handle, there was a long brown smear that looked almost black in the failing light. Mud, I told myself. Only mud. But it had a drag to it, like a palm had hit there and slid. I remember feeling my stomach tighten at that, not because I knew what it was, but because I suddenly didn't like being there on my own with someone else's unfinished moment sitting in front of me. I looked down and saw one clear boot print in the soft verge beside the car, pointed away from the road and into the trees. Not back toward the village, not down the track where help would be, straight into the woodland. There were other marks too, but that was the one that stood out. Deep heel, mud pressed cleanly. Whoever had left it had gone in quickly enough to leave weight behind. I stood there staring at that print longer than I should have. I actually remember thinking, if they wanted help, why didn't they stay by the road? And right on the heels of that came another thought I liked even less. If they ran into the trees, what made them do that? A voice behind me nearly made me jump out of my skin. "You won't find anyone." It was an older man coming up the track from the direction I'd driven in, walking a lean black lurcher on a long lead. I hadn't heard him approach at all, which bothered me more than I let show. He looked to be in his late 60s maybe, wearing a wax jacket and flat cap. One of those faces that seems permanently wind-burnt by weather. His dog had stopped dead the second it saw the open car and was standing rigid, ears back. I laughed, but it came out thinner than I meant it to. "Didn't hear you," I said. "Most don't," he replied, and even then he didn't smile. His eyes went from me to the open door and then to the trees beyond. "Been like that since this morning." I glanced at the car again. "You reported it?" "I?" He shrugged, but it wasn't casual, more like he didn't want to continue. "Someone will come for it." That should have been the end of it, really. Ordinary enough. Abandoned car, locals already aware, council or police dealing with it slowly because that's how things go. But the dog still wouldn't move. It kept staring into the trees, not barking, just staring so hard the muscles along its back looked tight. I looked at the man, then at the dog. Did someone go missing? He hesitated, properly hesitated. "Not that I've heard." The way he said it did not help. I nodded toward the trees. "There's a track through to the old basin, isn't there? I was thinking of stopping over." That changed him. Not dramatically. His face didn't go white or anything like that, but something closed in his expression. He looked me over like he was deciding whether I was joking. "By yourself?" "Yeah." The dog gave a low sound in its throat, barely a growl, and the man tugged the lead once without looking down at it. He kept his eyes on me. "Wouldn't," he said. There was no build-up, no explanation, just that one word, flat and certain. I gave a little shrug, trying not to sound rattled. "It's not exactly my first time." Didn't say it was. I didn't know what to do with that. If he'd been dramatic, I could have written him off. If he'd started spinning some local tale, I could have smiled politely and ignored it. But he just looked tired. Tired and irritated in the way people do when they know something they don't want to explain twice. "Why not?" I asked. He looked past me toward the deeper trees, then back to the hatchback with the open door. "Because once it starts going dark in there, sounds carry all wrong." It was such a strange answer that for a second I thought I'd misheard him. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, he said, "If you hear whistling, don't answer it." The words landed so oddly that I actually half smiled, waiting for him to grin and make it obvious he was winding me up. He didn't, not even a hint of it. His dog was still staring into the trees, and I had that stupid, embarrassed feeling you get when someone else's seriousness makes you aware that you've been trying too hard to stay relaxed. Right, I said, bit grim. That's up to you. Then he gave the lead another short pull, and the dog, reluctantly, finally moved with him. They went back down the track the way he'd come, not quickly, but with that quiet, deliberate pace people have when they're done talking. I watched them go further than I needed to. I think I wanted him to turn back and say something normal. Something like, only joking, or watch for trespassers, or even just, you'll be fine. Instead, he never looked back once. The dog did, though, twice. Both times staring past me, not at me. I stood there by my car for maybe another full minute after they disappeared. Just me, the open hatchback, the line of trees, and that feeling that something had shifted without anything actually happening. I honestly thought then that I should leave, not because I believed in whatever the old man was hinting at, but because the whole mood of the place had gone wrong. That abandoned car, the boot prints, the dog, the warning. It was enough that getting back in the car and finding somewhere normal would have been the sensible thing. But then, just as quickly, I started talking myself out of it. Local eccentric, rural superstition, someone dumping a car, a dog reacting to deer scent. I'd gone out there because I wanted to clear my head, and I hated the idea of letting a 5-minute conversation and a weird bit of atmosphere send me packing. Pride's a stupid thing when fear first starts. It doesn't look like fear. It looks like reasoning. So I grabbed my rucksack, locked the car, and set off down the forestry track on foot. At first, nothing happened, and that somehow made it worse. The woods closed around the track fast, pine trunks standing in tight black lines with bracken and old needles underfoot. The ground was damp enough to soften my steps, and every now and then I'd catch the smell of standing water from somewhere ahead. It was still light enough to see clearly, but the kind of light where everything at the edge of your vision already looks dusk-shaped. I kept thinking about the old man's exact wording. Sounds carry all wrong. Not a phrase I'd ever heard before, but once it got into my head, I couldn't stop noticing every little thing. The way my own boots sounded slightly delayed off the trees. The way a small crack from somewhere off to my left seemed further away than it should have been. The way I kept wanting to turn round because I felt ridiculously, irrationally, like I'd left something behind me open. The track dipped after 10 minutes or so, and I passed an old drainage ditch, half choked with reeds and black water. Beyond that, the trees thinned just enough for me to see a pale stretch of open ground in the distance where the old reservoir basin began. It should have been a relief, really, a visible destination, somewhere to stop. But instead I felt that same little knot in my stomach tighten again. Not sharp panic, just resistance, the sort of feeling you get when your body has made up its mind before your thoughts have caught up. I told myself to stop being pathetic and kept walking. Then, from somewhere deeper in the trees ahead, I heard one quick sound. Not a bird, not a branch snapping, not wind, a whistle, low, brief, human. I stopped dead. The silence, after it felt enormous, I listened hard, waiting for it to repeat. It didn't. Nothing moved, nothing called back. There was just the track, the trees, the dimming sky, and me standing there with my hand tightening around one rucksack strap. I honestly thought for a second about calling out, just to prove to myself how silly the whole thing was. But the old man's voice came back so clearly that it made my skin prickle. If you hear whistling, don't answer it. So I didn't. I just stood there listening to the emptiness, and for the first time that evening, I had the distinct, ugly feeling that whatever was wrong with Blackwater Fell had already noticed I'd come in alone. The thing about fear, real fear, not the kind you laugh off, is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It settles in slowly, like damp creep through your clothes. At that point, I wasn't panicking, not yet. I just didn't like it. That was the best way I could describe it to myself. I didn't like the silence, I didn't like the whistle, and I definitely didn't like how aware I suddenly felt of being completely on my own out there. I stood still for maybe 10 seconds after hearing it, staring down the track ahead like something might step out if I waited long enough. But nothing did. No movement, no second sound, no explanation. Just that same heavy quiet pressing in from all sides. Eventually, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and shook my head, trying to snap myself out of it. Probably someone further up, I muttered, more to hear a voice than anything else. Fisher, maybe. It sounded weak even as I said it. Still, I started walking again. Slower this time. My steps felt louder now, like they were echoing in a way they hadn't before. Every crunch of gravel or snap of a twig seemed to carry further than it should have. I kept glancing off the path into the trees, half expecting to catch someone watching me between the trunks. But all I saw were shadows and layers of dark branches, nothing that held still long enough to become a shape. For a few minutes, everything seemed normal again, or at least as normal as that place was going to feel. The track curved slightly to the left, rising just enough that I lost sight of the clearing ahead. I remember thinking that once I reached that open ground, I'd feel better. Something about being able to see further, to know what was around me, felt like it would bring a bit of control back. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not behind me, ahead. At first, it was faint, just a rhythm beneath the silence. Then it got louder, faster, too fast. Not a steady walk, not someone strolling along the path. This was running, hard. The kind of pace where you don't care about footing or noise, where every step lands heavy and careless. I froze again, instinctively stepping off the track and into the edge of the trees. My heart had started to pick up, not full panic, but enough that I could feel it in my throat. I stared down the path, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. And then I saw him. He came into view suddenly, like he'd just broken through an invisible line. A man, mid-30s maybe, running straight down the track toward me. Not jogging, not pacing himself, full sprint, arms pumping, shoulders tight, boots hitting the ground hard enough that I could hear each step clearly even before he got close. I remember thinking, that's not normal. There was something off about the way he moved. Not just the speed, though that alone would have been enough, but the urgency of it. Like he wasn't exercising or enjoying himself, like he was trying to put distance between himself and something else. I stepped further to the side, giving him room to pass. For a split second, I considered calling out, asking if he was all right, if he needed help. But the words caught in my throat before they even formed properly. Because as he got closer, I saw his face. It wasn't fear. That's what struck me first. If he looked terrified, I might have reacted differently. Might have asked questions, tried to understand. But he didn't look frightened. He looked wrong. His eyes were wide, but not focused, like he was looking through me instead of at me. His mouth hung slightly open, his breathing harsh and uneven, but there was no recognition there. No awareness that I was even standing a few feet from the path. It was like I wasn't part of his world at all. And then, just as he reached me, he slowed, not to a stop, just enough to turn his head slightly. "Don't stop," he said. The words came out low, strained, like he hadn't spoken properly in a while. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" I asked instinctively. He didn't answer straight away. His head turned a fraction more, just enough that I could see the side of his face clearly. There was mud on his jaw, smeared up toward his cheek. His clothes were damp at the edges, like he'd been wading through water or pushing through wet ground. "If you hear whistling," he added, voice even lower now, "don't." He cut himself off. His whole body tensed, mid-step. Not in a way that made sense. It was like something had just occurred to him, something sudden and unpleasant. His eyes flicked past me, not quite meeting mine, but landing somewhere just over my shoulder. Then, without finishing whatever he'd been about to say, he pushed forward again and broke back into that same frantic pace, running straight past me and down the track behind. I stood there, completely still, watching him go. For a couple of seconds, I didn't move, didn't think, just listened to the sound of his footsteps fading into the distance. The rhythm of them carried on longer than I expected, like the sound was stretching through the trees rather than dying out naturally. And then it stopped. Just stopped. Not gradually, not like he'd slowed to a walk. One moment there were footsteps, the next there was nothing. That's when my stomach dropped. I don't know why I did it. Part of me really didn't want to, but something in my head kept pushing at me, telling me I needed to check, needed to see. So I turned. He was still on the track, far enough away that I couldn't make out details clearly anymore, but close enough that I knew it was him. He wasn't running now, wasn't even moving. He was just standing there, facing me. The way he stood, it didn't look like someone catching their breath. It didn't look like someone deciding where to go next. It looked deliberate, planted, like he'd stopped for a reason, like he was waiting. I felt this cold, spreading sensation run through my chest, like all the warmth had just drained out of me. For a second, I genuinely couldn't move, couldn't even look away. Then, without thinking about it, I snapped my head back forward and started walking again. Not running, not yet, just walking, but faster than before, my steps uneven as I tried to keep some kind of control over myself. "Don't be stupid," I muttered under my breath. He's not right, that's all." I kept my eyes on the path ahead, refusing to look back again straight away. My hands had tightened around the straps of my rucksack, knuckles starting to ache, but I didn't loosen them. It felt like the only thing grounding me in that moment. 30 seconds passed, maybe less, maybe more. Time had started doing that strange thing where it stretches and compresses at the same time. I told myself I wouldn't look again. Then I did. The track behind me was empty. No movement, no figure, no sign of him at all. It didn't make sense. There wasn't anywhere for him to go that quickly without making noise. No side paths, no clear breaks in the trees. Just dense woodland on either side and the track running straight through it. I slowed slightly, scanning the edges of the forest as I walked, trying to pick out any sign of where he might have gone. But everything looked the same. Dark trunks, low branches, patches of shadow that could have been anything if you stared at them long enough. That was when a new thought pushed its way in, one I really didn't like. What if he wasn't running from something? I tried to shake it off immediately, but it stuck. What if he was running because of me? Or worse, what if I just walked past the thing he was trying to get away from? I stopped again, just for a second, the question hanging there heavier than anything else I thought so far. The silence around me seemed to deepen, like the woods were leaning in, waiting. "No," I said quietly, almost sharply. "That's ridiculous." I forced myself to keep moving, but the damage was done. Every step forward now felt like a decision I might regret. I wish I could say I turned back after that. Looking back now, that would have been the obvious choice. The smart one. You meet someone like that in the middle of nowhere, someone clearly not right, someone warning you about something they won't even finish explaining, and you leave. You don't keep going deeper into the same place they came running out of. But at the time, it didn't feel that simple. Because turning back meant walking straight toward wherever he'd gone. Toward whatever had made him stop mid-sentence. Toward that moment where he looked over my shoulder like something had been standing right behind me. And I couldn't shake that. So instead, I did what people always do when they're scared but don't want to admit it. I convinced myself forward was safer. I honestly thought if I just reached the clearing, got my bearings, maybe set up somewhere open, everything would feel normal again, like I'd crossed some invisible line and left whatever that was behind me. That's how I justified it. So I kept walking. The trees started thinning after another 5 minutes or so. Not drastically, but enough that the space between them widened and the ground underfoot shifted from dense needles to a patchier mix of mud and old grass. The air felt different too, damp, heavier. I could smell standing water before I saw it. Then the track dipped again, and the woods opened up. The reservoir basin stretched out in front of me like a wound in the landscape. It wasn't what I'd pictured at all. I'd expected water, or at least something recognizable as a lake. Instead, it was this wide, uneven expanse of dark, stagnant pools, broken up by long patches of exposed earth and thick reeds. The edges were soft and black, like the ground couldn't decide if it was solid or not. And beyond that, on the far side, the land rose again into another wall of trees. But what stood out, what my eyes went straight to, was the building. It sat off to the right, near the waterline. Small, squat. Concrete walls stained dark with age, a rusted metal door hanging slightly open, just enough to show a slice of black inside. It looked like one of those old pumping stations, the kind you'd find dotted around places like this and never think twice about in daylight. But in that fading light, with everything else so empty and still, it didn't look abandoned. It looked watched. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in. "No one's here," I said quietly, almost like I needed to hear it out loud. And for a second, it felt true. There was no movement in the reeds, No sound except the faintest ripple of water somewhere out in the basin. No sign of the man from the track. No sign of anyone at all. Just me and that building. I shifted my weight, scanning the open ground again. The last of the daylight was draining fast now, the sky turning that dull, heavy gray that comes right before everything drops into darkness. I knew I didn't have much time to set up before it got properly cold and hard to see. Just stay here, I muttered to myself. Open ground. You'll be fine. That was the plan. Stay visible. Stay aware. Don't go anywhere near the trees more than I had to. I moved off the track and picked a slightly raised patch of ground about 20 meters from the edge of the basin. It wasn't ideal, but it was dry enough, and I had a clear line of sight in most directions. I dropped my bag, stretched out my shoulders, and tried to focus on something normal, something routine. Tent first. I unstrapped it, laid it out, started assembling the poles. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over. It helped, in a way. Gave me something to concentrate on that wasn't the quiet or the building or the memory of that man's face. But even while I worked, I couldn't stop myself from looking up. Every few seconds, my eyes flicked back to the pumping hut. Still nothing. The door hung exactly as it had been. No movement, no shadow crossing it, no sign of anyone stepping in or out. See? I said under my breath. Nothing. I almost believed it. The tent went up quicker than usual, probably because I rushed it without realizing. I staked it down, tossed my sleeping bag inside, and then stood up again, wiping my hands on my trousers. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The silence had changed. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was contained, like all the sound in that clearing had been pressed flat. Even my own movements seemed duller, like they weren't carrying properly. I clicked my tongue against the roof of my mouth, just to test it, and the sound felt wrong. Too close, like it hadn't traveled anywhere. I froze for a second, listening. Nothing. Then I told myself to stop being ridiculous and reach for my stove. Get a fire going, I said. Light, heat, you'll feel better. I gathered what dry twigs I could find, keeping one eye on the building the whole time. The ground was damp, but there was enough scattered debris to make something small work. I built it carefully, struck the lighter, and watched the flame catch. For a moment, just a moment, it helped. The flicker of firelight, the faint crackle as it took, the small circle of warmth pushing back against the cold air. It felt like control, like normality. I crouched there, hands out toward the heat, and let myself breathe. That's better, I murmured. And then I looked up again, and someone was standing in the doorway. I didn't see them arrive. There was no movement, no transition. 1 second the doorway was empty, the next there was a figure standing there, framed perfectly in that narrow gap. My breath caught so sharply it actually hurt. The distance made it hard to make out details, but I could see enough to know it was a person. Tall, thin, shoulders slightly hunched, their head tilted just enough that it didn't sit right, and they weren't moving, not shifting weight, not adjusting stance, nothing, just standing there, watching. I stayed completely still, crouched by the fire, staring across the clearing. Hello? I called out before I could stop myself. My voice sounded too loud, too sudden. It seemed to hit the space around me and drop straight down instead of carrying. The figure didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't step forward, nothing. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. Are you all right? I tried again, louder this time. Still nothing. A slow, creeping feeling started to spread through me. Not sharp panic, something worse, something heavier. The kind of fear that builds because nothing changes. Right, I muttered, half to myself. Fine, just someone there. I forced a breath out through my nose and looked down at the fire, poking at it with a stick. I didn't want to keep staring, didn't want to feed whatever that feeling was, but I couldn't help it. I looked back up. The doorway was empty. I blinked. Actually blinked hard, like I thought my eyes might have tricked me. But no, nothing there. The door was still open, the same slice of black inside. But the figure, whoever or whatever it had been, was gone. All right, I whispered, though it came out thinner than I meant. My heart had started racing properly now, each beat sharp and loud in my chest. They moved, that's all. But I hadn't seen them move. I'd only looked away for a second, maybe less. I pushed myself to my feet, turning slowly in a full circle, scanning the clearing, the reeds, the edge of the basin, the trees beyond. Nothing. No one. Just the fire crackling softly behind me, and that building sitting there like it had been all along. I stood there for a long time, longer than I probably realized, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined it, that the light had played tricks, that I'd been on edge since the track and my brain had filled in something that wasn't there. It almost worked. Almost. Until I heard it. Low, faint, and unmistakably human. A whistle. Not from the trees this time. Not from the track. From somewhere out across the water. My entire body locked up. The sound hung in the air for a second, thin and clear, before fading into the silence again. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even blink. Because in that moment, one thought cut through everything else. That wasn't the man. And before I could even process that properly, something answered it. A second whistle. Closer, much closer, from somewhere behind me. I didn't turn around straight away. That's the part that still bothers me when I think back on it. Not the whistle itself, not even where it came from. It was the fact that for a few seconds I just stood there, completely still, like my body had decided before my mind could catch up that turning around would make it real. The first whistle had come from out across the basin, distant, separated. Something you could almost explain away if you were desperate enough. The second one, that had been close. Too close. Close enough that I could feel where it had come from without needing to look. Somewhere just beyond the edge of the firelight. Somewhere behind me, where everything dropped off into shadow. I swallowed, slow and dry, and forced myself to breathe through my nose. My hands had gone cold without me noticing, fingers slightly numb as they hung at my sides. "Don't react," I whispered to myself. I don't know why I said that. Maybe because of what the old man had told me. Maybe because of what the runner had almost said before he cut himself off. Either way, the idea of answering, of even acknowledging it, felt like a mistake I couldn't undo. So I stayed quiet. The fire behind me cracked softly, a single ember shifting and sending up a brief flare of orange light. It stretched my shadow out long and thin across the ground in front of me, right toward the basin. For a moment, I focused on that instead. My shadow, something I could control, something I understood. Then I noticed something that made my chest tighten again. There was another shadow moving beside it. Not clear, not fully formed, just a distortion, like the firelight was catching on something that wasn't there a second ago. It flickered, stretched, then slipped away as the flame dipped. I turned, slowly, carefully. The space behind me was empty, or at least it looked empty. The firelight only reached so far. Beyond that, everything blurred into dark shapes and deeper black. The ground dipped slightly toward the reeds, and the edge of that drop was just visible, a soft line where the light ended and the night began. I stared at that line, my eyes straining to pick out anything that didn't belong. Nothing moved, nothing stepped forward, nothing revealed itself, and somehow that made it worse. Because now I knew, without seeing anything, that something was there, watching, waiting. I took a slow step back toward the fire, then another, until I could feel the heat against the backs of my legs. It didn't comfort me anymore. If anything, it made me feel exposed, lit up, like I put a marker on myself in the middle of all that darkness. "That's stupid," I muttered. "It's just a fire." But the thought stuck. The fire wasn't protection, it was a signal, and if I could see out into the dark from where I stood, then anything out there could see me even more clearly. I looked down at it, at the small pile of glowing embers and thin flames licking at the wood, and for the first time since I'd lit it, I didn't feel better. I felt visible. Another minute passed, maybe two. No sound, no movement, just that same suffocating quiet pressing in on all sides. And then, footsteps. Not loud, not crashing through the undergrowth. Soft, deliberate. Just beyond the reach of the firelight, off to my left. One step, then another. I turned my head slowly in that direction, my entire body tensing as I tried to locate the source. The sound stopped the second I moved, like whoever or whatever had made it was listening for me just as much as I was listening for them. We stayed like that. Me standing by the fire, heart pounding so hard it made my ears ring. Something out there, just beyond the light. Waiting. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like minutes. Could have been seconds. Then, from somewhere ahead, closer to the basin, I heard a third whistle. Short, sharp, different from the first two. And before the sound had even fully faded, something moved. I saw it. just for a second. A shape slipping between two thin trees, low to the ground, too quick and too smooth to follow properly. It wasn't the same height as the figure I'd seen in the doorway. This was smaller, closer, moving in a way that made my stomach twist. I stepped back instinctively, my heel catching slightly on uneven ground. "Stop," I said under my breath, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. Everything went still again. No footsteps, no movement, no sound. The fire popped suddenly behind me, a sharp crack that made me flinch harder than I should have. I spun halfway back toward it, then forced myself to turn forward again, scanning the darkness. "This is ridiculous," I whispered. "There's nothing there." But even as I said it, I knew I didn't believe it anymore, because now there was a pattern. The whistles weren't random. They were spaced, timed, one far away, one close, one somewhere in between. And the movement, it matched. Something was closing in, or worse, something was circling. A cold, sinking realization settled into my chest. The figure in the doorway, the whistle from the basin, the footsteps behind me, they didn't feel like separate things anymore. They felt connected, coordinated. I turned slightly, looking over my shoulder toward the reeds by the water's edge. The darkness there seemed thicker somehow, heavier, like it was holding shape rather than just filling space. And then I saw it. A figure standing half hidden behind a tree, not far. Closer than I'd expected, maybe 10, 15 meters at most. It wasn't fully in the open, just enough of it visible that my brain could piece it together. A shoulder, part of an arm, the outline of a head. It was still, completely still, but I knew, without question, that it was looking directly at me. My throat tightened. I didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even breathe properly. We just stared at each other, or at least I stared at it, because I couldn't see its face clearly. The firelight didn't reach far enough to give me that much detail. All I had was the shape, the presence, the certainty that I wasn't imagining it anymore. A minute passed, maybe less, maybe more. Time had stopped making sense, and then, without any sudden movement, without any sound at all, it stepped back, just one step, and vanished into the dark. Not like it ran, not like it turned, it just wasn't there anymore. Gone. I stood frozen for another few seconds, waiting for something else to happen, for footsteps, for another whistle, for anything. Nothing came, just silence. Thick, endless, wrong. That was when the thought finally pushed through clearly enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. You shouldn't be here. Not in a vague, uneasy way. In a very specific, undeniable sense. Like I'd walked into something already in progress. Like this place wasn't empty when I arrived. And whatever was out there, it had been waiting long before I got here. I let out a shaky breath and looked down at the fire again. The flame seemed smaller now, weaker. The light barely reaching beyond the immediate ground around me. And suddenly, it felt like the worst thing I could possibly have done. Because if I could barely see anything beyond a few meters, then anything out there could see me perfectly. I didn't hesitate after that. I grabbed the nearest branch and started smothering the flames, pressing them down into the dirt, scattering the embers until the glow faded and the clearing dropped into darkness. For a split second, as the last of the light died, I thought I saw something move closer, and then everything went completely black. The moment the fire went out, everything changed. It wasn't just darker, it felt like something had been switched. The clearing didn't feel like open ground anymore, it felt enclosed. Like the darkness wasn't just the absence of light, but something with weight to it. Something pressing inward from every direction at once. For a second, I couldn't see anything at all. Just black, thick, absolute black. I stood there, barely breathing, waiting for my eyes to adjust. My ears strained instead, trying to pull meaning from whatever faint sounds might still be there. Nothing. No wind, no water, no footsteps, no whistle, just that suffocating stillness. I told myself that was good. That silence meant whatever had been out there had moved on, lost interest, gone back into the trees. But the longer it stayed quiet, the less I believed that, because it didn't feel empty, it felt occupied. Slowly, shapes began to form. At first, just vague outlines, the pale stretch of ground in front of me, the darker vertical lines of trees beyond, the suggestion of reeds off to the right where the basin dropped away. I blinked a few times, forcing my eyes to work, trying to pull as much detail out of the darkness as possible. And then I saw it, right at the edge of the waterline, a figure, standing. perfectly still. My heart slammed hard enough that I actually felt it in my throat. It hadn't been there before, or if it had, I hadn't been able to see it through the firelight. Now, without that glow, it stood out in a way that made my skin crawl. It was facing me. There was no mistaking that. Even in the dark, I could feel the direction of its attention, locked onto me, unbroken. It stood just where the soft ground met the black water, half of its shape blending into the reeds. For a moment, I thought it might be the same figure I'd seen earlier at the pumping hut. The height was similar. The posture too, slightly hunched, head tilted just enough to feel wrong. But something about it was different, lower, closer. And as my eyes adjusted further, I realized what it was. Its feet, or rather, the lack of anything on them, bare, planted directly in the mud. I could see the pale contrast where skin met the darker ground, the way the mud seemed to cling around the ankles. It wasn't standing on the path, it wasn't avoiding the water, it was in it, as if it didn't care, as if the cold, the wet, the filth, none of it meant anything. A slow, creeping dread started to settle into my chest. This wasn't someone who had wandered out there by mistake. This wasn't someone passing through. They were standing there deliberately, waiting, watching. I didn't move, didn't speak. I didn't even dare shift my weight in case the sound of it gave me away any more than I already was. We stayed like that, me, frozen in place, eyes locked on the shape at the water's edge. It completely still, half hidden, head angled slightly down but unmistakably focused on me. Seconds passed, then more. Time stretched again, thinning out until it barely felt real. And then, behind me, another whistle, closer than before. Close enough that I felt the sound more than I heard it, a low vibration that seemed to travel through the air and settle somewhere deep in my chest. My entire body tensed, because now I knew. There wasn't just one. The figure by the water didn't react, didn't turn, didn't shift. It just stayed exactly where it was, watching me, while something else stood behind me. I shut my eyes for half a second, just long enough to try and steady myself. Don't turn, I told myself. Don't give them that. I didn't know why I thought that mattered. Maybe it didn't. Maybe whatever was out there already had everything it needed. But instinct, raw and sharp, told me that reacting, acknowledging, engaging in any way would make it worse. So I stayed facing forward, staring at the one in the water, listening to the one behind me. Another sound came then, not a whistle, a step, soft, measured, from behind, and then another. They weren't rushing me, they weren't charging or trying to scare me. They were moving carefully, deliberately, like they had all the time in the world. My breathing had gone shallow without me realizing it. Each inhale felt too loud, too noticeable. I tried to slow it down, but it only made me more aware of it. The figure at the water's edge shifted, just slightly, a small adjustment of weight, but enough to confirm it wasn't something fixed. It was alive, and it knew I was there. My throat tightened painfully. What did they want? The question came uninvited, and immediately I wished it hadn't, because the answer didn't feel like something I wanted to know. The footsteps behind me stopped. Right at the edge of where the firelight used to reach. I could feel it now. The presence. Close. Too close. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed at me to look, to confirm what was there, to see it clearly so I could understand it. But something deeper, something older, held me in place. If you look, the thought didn't finish. It didn't need to. Because at that exact moment, the figure by the water took a step forward, slow, controlled, one bare foot lifting from the mud with a soft, wet sound, then setting down again, closer, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving. And with that single step, everything inside me snapped into place. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was intentional. I was being approached from both sides. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. The man on the track, his warning, the whistle, the figure in the doorway, the one in the water, the one behind me. It all lined up in the worst possible way. This wasn't one person. And even if it was, they weren't behaving like people. Another step, closer. The water figure's outline grew slightly clearer as it moved, enough that I could see the angle of its shoulders, the unnatural stillness of its arms. Behind me, a breath, not mine, close enough that I felt it brush the back of my neck. That was it. That was the moment the last bit of hesitation disappeared. I didn't wait, didn't think. I moved, fast. I spun away from both of them, grabbing blindly for my torch as I did, nearly tripping over my own footing in the dark. My fingers fumbled for the switch, heart hammering so hard it drowned everything else out. The beam snapped on, and for a split second, I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. A shape, too close, too wrong, standing where no one should have been. And then it moved, not away, not back toward me. I didn't scream, didn't shout, I just ran. I didn't think about where I was going. That's the first mistake people always talk about when you panic. You lose direction, lose logic, lose control. But in that moment, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was distance. Getting away from whatever had just been behind me, whatever had breathed down my neck, like it knew exactly how close it could get without touching me. The beam from my torch shook violently as I ran, cutting through the darkness in jagged bursts of light. The ground beneath me was uneven, slick in places, and more than once my foot slipped just enough to send a shock of adrenaline through me. But I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Behind me, I heard movement. Not heavy, crashing footsteps. Something lighter, faster, keeping pace. I didn't turn to look. I knew if I did, if I saw it clearly, I wouldn't keep moving. The reeds thinned as I pushed forward, giving way to firmer ground, then patches of low grass and scattered stone. My breath came in sharp bursts now, loud and ragged, and I hated how much noise I was making. It felt like I was announcing exactly where I was with every inhale, every step. "Keep going," I muttered under my breath. "Just keep going." The torch beam caught the outline of the track ahead, at least what I thought was the track, a faint line through the grass, darker than the rest, leading back toward the trees. Relief hit me in a rush. There. That's it. Just follow it back. I angled toward it without slowing, boots hitting the ground harder now as I found slightly more stable footing. For a few seconds, I let myself believe I'd gotten out of the worst of it, that I'd break back into the woods, retrace my steps, reach the car, and be gone before anything had a chance to catch up. Then something didn't feel right. The track looked different, not wrong enough to stop me immediately, just off, narrower maybe, less worn. The ground hadn't been disturbed in the same way as the path I'd come down earlier. No clear tire marks, no defined edge, but I was already on it, already committed, and behind me, another sound, a step, closer than before. I pushed harder. The trees closed in again, the open basin vanishing behind me as the darkness thickened between the trunks. The beam of the torch bounced wildly now, lighting up branches, uneven ground, patches of mud that looked darker than anything else around them. My lungs were starting to burn, each breath pulling in cold air that scraped at the back of my throat. I tried to slow my breathing, tried to find some kind of rhythm again, but it wouldn't come, because the footsteps hadn't stopped. They weren't constant. That was the worst part. They came in bursts. A few quick, light steps, then silence. Then another set, always just behind where I'd expect them to be. Close enough to feel, not close enough to see. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Nothing, just darkness. But I knew better now. It's there. That thought didn't come from panic. It came from certainty. I turned forward again, pushing through the trees, following the path as it curved slightly to the right. My torch beam flicked over something ahead, a wooden post, half-rotted, leaning at an angle, a sign. I slowed just enough to focus the light on it. The lettering was faded, barely visible beneath layers of moss and dirt, but I could just make it out. Spindlemere Pump House, an arrow pointing further ahead. I stared at it, my breath catching. "No," I whispered. That wasn't right. The pump house was back at the basin. I'd just run away from it. So why was this sign pointing forward? A cold, creeping confusion settled over me, cutting through the adrenaline just enough to make everything feel unstable. I turned slightly, angling the torch back the way I'd come. The path behind me looked the same. Same trees, same narrow stretch of ground. No visible opening back to the basin. No clear sign of the route I'd just taken. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. I'd run in a straight line. I was sure of it. I hadn't turned enough to loop back. Had I? I tried to retrace it in my head, where I'd stepped, how the ground had felt underfoot, but it all blurred together, lost in the rush of panic and darkness. "Think," I muttered, louder this time. Just think." Another sound, not footsteps, a whistle. Soft, close. From somewhere off to my right, I flinched, the torch beam snapping toward the sound. Nothing, just trees. But now the direction had changed. Before it had been behind me. Now it was beside me, tracking me. My chest tightened. "They're moving," I said under my breath. Or it was moving. Because the thought of there being more than one of them had started to twist into something worse. Something less logical. Something that didn't quite follow the rules I understood. I turned back to the sign, my mind racing. Spindlemere Pump House. The same name carved into the wood back at the hut. The same place I just left. And yet, the sign was here. Ahead of me, leading me further in. "No," I said again, sharper now. "That's not." "No." I stepped back from it, shaking my head. "I'm going the wrong way." That had to be it. I'd panicked, taken the wrong path, looped myself around without realizing. Simple, explainable, fixable. I turned to head back the way I'd come, and froze, because the path behind me was gone. Not completely, but different. Where there had been a clear line of flattened ground before, there was now just uneven forest floor, no defined route, no obvious direction, just trees and shadow. And that same oppressive silence pressing in around me. My pulse spiked again, harder this time. "That's not," I stopped, because arguing with it didn't change anything. The path had shifted, or I had. Either way, I was lost. A new kind of fear took hold then. Not the immediate sharp panic of something chasing me. Something deeper, slower, more dangerous. The kind of fear that comes when you realize you've lost control of where you are. And worse, you don't know how to get it back. The whistle came again. This time, behind me, I spun, the torch beam slicing through the darkness. And for a split second, I saw a shape between the trees. Tall, still, watching. Then it slipped out of sight. Not running, not rushing, just gone, like it had never been there. My grip tightened around the torch, knuckles aching. "They're hurting me," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Because that's what it felt like. The path, the sign, the way the sounds kept shifting. Always just enough to keep me moving, but never enough to let me stop. Always pushing me, forward, deeper towards something I couldn't see. I looked back at the sign one last time. Spindlemere Pump House. The arrow seemed darker now, more defined in the beam of the torch. Waiting, pointing, like it knew I didn't have another choice. I stood there for a second, chest rising and falling too fast, trying to decide. Go back into the dark with no path, or follow the only direction that made any kind of sense, even if it led straight back to where this had started. Another step sounded behind me, closer than before. I didn't turn. I couldn't, because I already knew what I'd see. So instead, I turned back toward the sign and started walking. I didn't run this time. I wanted to. Every part of me was still wired for it. But something about the way the woods had shifted, the way the path had disappeared behind me, made running feel useless. Like it would only make me lose whatever little control I had left. So I walked. Fast, deliberate, following the direction of the sign. The torchlight stayed fixed ahead of me now, no more swinging wildly, no more checking behind me every few seconds. I didn't want to see what was back there anymore. I already knew it was following. I could feel it in the same way you feel someone staring at you from across a room. You don't need to turn to know it's happening. The ground underfoot grew softer as I moved, patches of mud pulling slightly at my boots, the smell of stagnant water creeping back into the air. That same heavy dampness from earlier returned, thicker now, more suffocating. I knew where I was before I saw it. The reservoir, or whatever was left of it. The trees thinned again, just like before, and the clearing opened up in front of me. And there it was, the pumping hut, exactly where it had been, exactly as I'd left it, the rusted door hanging slightly open, the dark interior beyond. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, my breath uneven, my thoughts scrambling to make sense of what had just happened. "I didn't go that far," I whispered. I couldn't have. There was no way I'd looped back around like that, not without noticing, not without seeing the basin before the trees opened up again. But there it was, the same place, the same building, waiting. A low ripple moved across the water to my left, faint but enough to draw my attention. I turned the torch slightly, scanning the edge of the basin. Nothing, no figure this time, no movement in the reeds, just black water and the faint reflection of the sky above. If anything, that made it worse, because now I didn't know where it had gone, or how close it still was. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, and looked back at the hut. "If there's anyone here," I called out, forcing my voice to stay steady. I need help. The words felt wrong the second they left my mouth. Too loud, too exposed. They seemed to hit the clearing and drop straight down, just like before, swallowed by the silence instead of carrying across it. No answer came. No movement. Nothing. I stood there for another few seconds, waiting, hoping, stupidly, that someone normal would step out. Someone who could explain all of this. Someone who would laugh it off, tell me I'd gotten turned around, that there were other paths, other signs. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't going to happen, because nothing about this place felt normal anymore. And if there was anyone in that building, they weren't there to help. I took a slow step forward, then another. The ground squelched slightly beneath my boots as I crossed the clearing, each step feeling heavier than it should have. The closer I got, the more the hut seemed to pull at my attention, like it was the only solid thing left in that entire space. Everything else felt uncertain, the trees, the water, even the ground beneath me. But the hut, that felt real, fixed, and for some reason, that made it the only place I could go. By the time I reached the door, my hand was already shaking. Not violently, just enough that I noticed it. I hesitated for a second, standing just outside, the torch beam cutting into the darkness beyond the threshold. "Hello?" I said again, quieter this time. Still nothing. No sound from inside, no movement, just that same thick, waiting silence. I took a breath, then stepped in. The air inside was colder, staler. It hit me immediately, like walking into a space that hadn't been properly opened in years. The smell was damp and metallic, with something underneath it I couldn't quite place. Not strong enough to identify, but enough to make the back of my throat tighten. The beam of the torch swept across the interior. Concrete walls, a rusted control panel on one side, pipes running along the ceiling, some of them broken or hanging loose. And in the far corner, a small wooden bench. The place looked abandoned, unused, but not untouched. There were marks on the floor, faint, dragged, like something had been moved across it more than once. I stepped further inside, turning slowly, letting the light trace over every surface. "That's it," I muttered. "Just an old building. Nothing else." But I didn't believe it. Not really, because there was something else. Something I hadn't seen at first. On the wall, opposite the door, at about eye level. I moved closer, the beam tightening as I focused it. At first, it looked like scratches. Random. Chaotic. But as I stepped closer, the pattern started to form. Words. Carved into the surface, over and over again. Layered on top of each other so many times they almost blurred together. I leaned in, squinting slightly, trying to pick out a clear line. And then I saw it. One phrase, repeated. Dozens of times. "Don't whistle back." My chest tightened. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry again. "What does that even?" I started, but the words trailed off. Because something about it felt familiar. Not the phrase itself, but the idea behind it. The warning, the way it connected to everything that had happened so far. The old man, the runner, the whistle. I ran the torch slowly across the wall, following the scratches, noticing how deep some of them were. Whoever had carved them hadn't done it casually. They'd pressed hard, over and over again, like they were trying to make sure it stayed there, like it mattered, like it was the only thing they could leave behind. My hand drifted up without me thinking, fingers hovering just above the surface. I didn't touch it. Something told me not to. Instead, I stepped back slightly, scanning the rest of the wall. There were other marks too, older, fainter, not words, just lines, tallies, grouped in uneven sets. I didn't count them. I didn't want to, because I had a feeling I wouldn't like the number. A sound came from outside, soft, wet, like something shifting in mud. I froze. The torch beam flicked instinctively toward the door, landing on the empty frame and the darkness beyond. Nothing there. No figure, no movement, just the clearing and the basin and the silence. But it didn't feel empty anymore. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what I'd read. I took a slow step back, my eyes never leaving the doorway. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, just think." But thinking wasn't helping anymore, because now I knew something I hadn't known before. This wasn't new. Whatever was out there, it had been here before, and someone had tried to warn me. The sound came again, closer this time, just outside the door. And then a hand pressed against the glass panel, thin, pale, mud streaked along the fingers. I stopped breathing. The hand stayed there for a second, perfectly still. Then slowly it dragged downward, leaving a dark smear behind. And just beyond it, something shifted, blocking out what little light remained outside. Standing there, right on the other side of the door, close enough now that I could hear it. Breathing, slow, controlled, waiting. And then, very softly, it spoke. Callum. The sound of my name didn't feel real. Not at first. It didn't echo. It didn't carry. It just appeared. Like it had been placed directly into the space between my ears rather than spoken out loud. Quiet, almost gentle, but wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I didn't move, didn't answer, didn't even blink. Because the second I heard it, something inside me locked up completely. How does it know that? That was the only thought that mattered. My name wasn't something that could be guessed. I hadn't spoken to anyone properly since I'd arrived. I hadn't introduced myself, hadn't answered the runner, hadn't told the old man. There was no reason, none, for anything out there to know who I was. And yet, Callum, the voice came again. Still soft, still calm, but closer this time. Not louder, closer, like whatever it belonged to had leaned in just slightly. My eyes stayed fixed on the door, on the smeared glass where the hand had dragged down. The shape beyond it shifted faintly, blocking and unblocking the dim gray light from outside. It wasn't pressing in, it wasn't forcing the door, it was just standing there, waiting, like it knew I was inside, like it knew I'd heard it, and like it was expecting something back. My throat tightened painfully. Don't answer. That instinct came sharp and immediate, cutting through everything else. The wall behind me, the words carved into it. Don't whistle back. Not don't respond, not don't speak. Specifically, don't whistle back. My mind caught on that detail, trying to make sense of it even as fear built higher and higher in my chest. Why whistle? Why not talk? Another sound came then, not from the door, from somewhere further out in the clearing. A whistle, low, drawn out, the same tone I'd heard before. And the shape at the door didn't move, didn't react, it just stayed there, listening, waiting. And suddenly, something clicked. Not fully, not logically, but enough. The whistles weren't random. They weren't just sounds. They were signals, calls. And whatever was out there, it was listening for an answer. My breathing had gone shallow again, barely pulling in enough air to steady me. I forced myself to take a slow breath through my nose, keeping as quiet as I could. Callum, the voice again, closer still, almost right against the glass now. I could hear something else beneath it this time. A faint wetness to the sound, like the words were being pushed through a mouth that didn't quite form them properly. My skin crawled. I took a step back without thinking, my heel brushing against the concrete floor with a soft scrape that sounded far too loud in the confined space. The shape outside shifted immediately, just slightly, but enough. It had heard me. Of course it had. My heart slammed harder, panic starting to break through the thin layer of control I'd been clinging to. Stay quiet. Don't respond. Don't give it anything. Another whistle came from the clearing, this one sharper, shorter, like a question. The shape at the door tilted its head slightly, listening, waiting. And then it whistled, right there, on the other side of the glass. The sound was soft, almost delicate, perfectly matched to the ones I'd heard before. Not random, not clumsy, intentional. It held the note just long enough, then stopped. Silence dropped again, heavy, expectant. I realized then what it wanted. Not words, not movement, a reply. My stomach twisted. If you hear whistling, don't answer it. The old man's voice came back, clearer now than it had been at the time. And the runner, if you hear whistling, don't. He hadn't finished, but he hadn't needed to. I understood now, or at least I thought I did, because whatever was out there, it wasn't trying to break in. It wasn't forcing the door. It was waiting for permission. The thought made my skin crawl. Don't give it that. Another whistle, from further out, then another, from somewhere else entirely. Not just one direction, not just one place. They were moving, circling. The one at the door stayed silent, still, waiting. And then softly, almost kindly, Callum, let me in. The words hit harder than the whistles, because they sounded human, because they sounded normal, because for half a second, they sounded reasonable. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself not to react, not to speak, not to move. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to do something, anything, but the only thing keeping me still was the certainty that whatever this was, it didn't need force. It needed agreement. And I wasn't going to give it that. Another long second passed, then another. And then the handle moved, Not violently, not suddenly, just a slow, deliberate shift downward. I stared at it, my breath catching again. The door wasn't locked. I hadn't locked it. Why would I? The handle reached its lowest point, then stopped. The shape on the other side didn't push, didn't try to open it further. It just held it there, like it was testing, waiting for me to react, for me to stop it, for me to allow it. I stayed where I was, completely still. The handle slowly returned to its original position. The shape outside didn't move away, didn't leave. It just stayed there, close, patient. The whistles outside had stopped now. The clearing had gone silent again. And for the first time since this started, I realized something that made everything worse. It wasn't trying to scare me. It wasn't rushing. It wasn't losing control. It was calm, more calm than I was. And that meant it had time. A long moment passed. Then, without warning, the shape shifted sideways. Out of view, the doorway cleared, the glass empty again. The pressure in the room changed instantly. Not relief. Something worse. Because now, I didn't know where it had gone. I didn't know if it was still outside or if it had moved somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't see. I stepped forward slowly, my torch rising slightly as I angled it toward the door. "Don't," I whispered to myself. But I kept moving anyway, because not knowing felt worse than anything else. I reached the door, stopped just short of it, and angled the light outward. The clearing was empty. No figure, no movement, no sound, just the basin, the reeds, the darkness. I scanned left. Nothing. Right. Nothing. Behind the hut I couldn't see. My chest tightened again. Because there was only one place left it could be. I didn't want to turn, didn't want to confirm it. But something deep in my gut told me I was already too late. A sound came from inside the room, behind me. Not loud, just a shift. A faint scrape against concrete. I froze. The torch beam still pointed outward, my arm locked in place. No, slowly, too slowly, I turned. And there, standing in the far corner where there had been nothing before, was a second figure, with me. For a second, my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. I had been standing in that room, looking at that corner. There had been nothing there, no movement, no shape, no presence. And now, there was someone standing there, still, silent, watching me. My grip tightened on the torch until my fingers ached, the beam shaking slightly as it fixed on the figure. It didn't react to the light, didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there. And the worst part, it wasn't facing me. Its back was turned, head slightly tilted like the one outside had been, shoulders narrow, frame thin, bare feet pressed flat against the cold concrete floor, mud smeared faintly around them. I felt something drop in my stomach, cold, heavy, because I knew, without needing to see its face, this wasn't the same one that had been outside the door. That meant there were at least two, one outside, one inside. And I hadn't heard this one come in, hadn't seen it, hadn't felt it. It had just been there. My breathing grew uneven again, shallow and quick despite every attempt to steady it. Don't react. The thought came automatically now, not from logic, from instinct, because everything about this situation felt like it was built on reaction, on response, on acknowledgement. I didn't speak, didn't step forward, didn't step back. I just stood there, staring at it, waiting for it to do something. It didn't. Seconds passed. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like the walls had closed in without me noticing. The air had thickened too, heavier than before, carrying that same damp metallic smell, but stronger now, sharper. The figure shifted, not a full movement, just a slight adjustment, its head tilted further to one side, listening, not to me, to something else. And then, from outside, a whistle. The figure in front of me reacted instantly. Its head snapped slightly toward the sound, not fast, not jerky, but deliberate, like it recognized it, like it understood it. And then, slowly, it started to turn. I took an involuntary step back, my heels scraping against the floor. "Stop," I whispered, barely audible even to myself. It didn't. It kept turning, slow, measured, unhurried, like it knew I wasn't going anywhere. The torchlight hit its shoulder first, then its neck, then its face, and everything inside me went cold, because it wasn't right. Not in any way I could explain properly. The features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, all in the right places, but they didn't sit correctly, like they'd been arranged without understanding how they were meant to work together. The eyes were too wide, too still, the mouth slightly open but not breathing properly, and the skin pale, damp looking, like it had been underwater for too long. I couldn't look at it for more than a second. My gaze flicked away instinctively, landing somewhere over its shoulder, but that only made it worse. Because behind it, on the wall, the scratches stood out clearer now, deeper, sharper, and I could see something I hadn't noticed before. Beneath the repeated phrase, "Don't whistle back," there was something else, fainter, harder to read, but there, carved lower down. "It learns you." My stomach twisted, my eyes snapped back to the figure. It was looking at me now, directly linking, and slowly its mouth moved, not speaking, not forming words, just moving. Like it was trying to remember how. Another whistle came from outside, short, sharp. The figure's head twitched slightly toward the door again, then back to me. Then it tilted its head, mimicking something. I realized with a jolt, it was copying me. The way I'd been standing, the angle of my head, even the way my shoulders had been set. It wasn't exact, but it was close enough to feel wrong, too close. My chest tightened. "It learns you." The words on the wall echoed in my head, not a warning, a description. It watches, it listens, and then it imitates. Another shift, another adjustment. Its mouth opened slightly wider, and this time a sound came out. Not a whistle, not quite, something between breath and voice. "Caw!" It stopped, the sound breaking apart before it could form properly. My heart slammed harder. "No," I said, sharper now, the words slipping out before I could stop it. The figure froze, completely. Its eyes locked onto me, and then, slowly, its mouth curved. Not a smile, not really, but something close enough to make my stomach drop. Because it wasn't emotion, it was imitation. Another whistle came from outside, longer this time, more drawn out, and the figure copied it perfectly. The sound that came from its mouth was identical. Same tone, same pitch, same length. The air in the room seemed to tighten around me. Because now I understood. The whistles weren't just calls, they were tests, signals to find out what was there, what could respond, and what couldn't. I took another step back, my hand tightening around the torch. "Stay back," I said, though my voice shook despite everything. The figure didn't move toward me, didn't advance, but it didn't retreat either. It just stood there, watching, learning, waiting, and then from outside, a voice, clear, human. "Callum!" My head snapped toward the door instinctively. Relief hit me so fast it almost made me dizzy. I stopped, because the second I heard it, I knew. That wasn't right either. The tone was off, too flat, too precise, like it had been copied from memory rather than spoken naturally. "Callum, it's me. Open the door." My throat tightened again. I didn't recognize the voice, not properly, but something about it felt familiar enough to be dangerous, like it was reaching for something in my head and almost getting it right. Behind me, the figure in the room didn't react, didn't even turn. It stayed focused on me, waiting, like it knew I was about to make a choice. The voice came again, closer, more urgent. "Callum, please, just open it." My hand twitched slightly, just a small movement, but enough. The figure's head tilted again, watching, learning, and in that moment I realized what the real danger was. Not the things outside, not even the one in the room. It was me, my reactions, my instincts, the way I wanted to respond, because that's what they were waiting for. That's what they needed. I took a slow step back, then another, moving away from the door, away from the voice, away from everything that felt even remotely familiar. "I'm not opening it," I said, forcing the words out steady this time. The voice stopped, completely. No response, no reaction, just silence. And behind me, the figure finally moved. One slow step forward, bare feet scraping softly against the concrete. Closer. I raised the torch instinctively, the beam hitting its face again. And this time, it spoke, clear, perfect, in my voice. "I'm not opening it." The sound of my own voice coming from it didn't just scare me. It broke something. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet internal shift, like a piece of certainty snapping loose. Because hearing something copy you perfectly, with no hesitation, no distortion, no human delay, it strips away the last bit of control you think you have. For a second, I couldn't move. I just stood there, torch raised, staring at it as the words echoed faintly off the concrete walls. "I'm not opening it." Same tone, same rhythm, same breath pattern. It hadn't just copied the words. It had copied how I said them. My throat tightened. "That's not." I started, but the sentence died halfway out. Because what was the point? Arguing with it made no sense. The figure tilted its head slightly again, watching me. Not aggressively, not like it was about to attack, just studying. Behind me, the door remained closed. The voice outside hadn't returned. The whistles had stopped too. Everything had gone silent again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt focused, intentional. Like everything out there had paused to watch what I would do next. The figure took another step forward, slow, measured, bare feet dragging slightly across the floor, closer. I backed up instinctively, my heel hitting the wooden bench behind me. It creaked softly under the pressure, the sound sharp enough to make me flinch. "Stay back," I said again, louder this time. The figure stopped, not because I told it to, because it was observing. It held its position, eyes fixed on me, head angled just enough to suggest it was processing something. Then its mouth moved again. "Stay back." My voice, again. But this time, there was a slight delay, a fraction of a second too long between the words, a subtle distortion in the rhythm. It wasn't perfect anymore. It was learning, improving. My stomach dropped, because that meant it hadn't finished. Another step, closer still. The torchlight hit its face fully now, and I forced myself to look at it, really look at it, despite every instinct telling me not to. The features were still wrong, but they were adjusting, subtly. The eyes seemed less wide, the mouth less slack, like it was refining itself, using me as a reference. "Don't," I said, quieter now, more to myself than anything else. The figure's lips parted slightly. "Don't." Closer again. I could hear it now. Not just the voice. The breathing. Slow, controlled, deliberate, but wrong. Too even, too consistent. Like it was mimicking the idea of breathing rather than actually needing to. I shifted sideways, trying to put space between us, my shoulder brushing against the wall. The concrete was cold through my jacket, grounding in a way nothing else was. "Think," I whispered. But thinking wasn't helping, because everything logical about this situation had already fallen apart. The path, the sign, the voices, the figures, none of it followed rules I understood, except one. It responded to me, my words, my movements, my presence. It learned, and that meant I needed to stop giving it anything to work with. I went still, completely, lowered the torch slightly so it wasn't shining directly into its face anymore. Stopped speaking, stopped reacting, stopped being. The figure froze too, in response, its head tilted again, but less this time. Smaller movement, more controlled. Waiting, I held my breath, counted in my head. 1, 2, 3, nothing, no step forward, no sound, just that same locked stare. Another second, another. And then, from outside, a whistle. Sharp, urgent. The figure's head snapped toward the door instantly, faster than before, more precise. Then, it looked back at me, and for the first time there was something in its expression that hadn't been there before. Not emotion, not exactly, but something close, recognition, understanding. It took one more step forward, close enough now that I could see the details clearly. The skin wasn't just pale, it was stretched, too tight in some places, too loose in others, like it hadn't settled properly. The eyes, they weren't just wide, they were focused, locked onto mine with a clarity that hadn't been there before. And the mouth, it curved again, closer to a real smile this time. Then it spoke. Not copying, not echoing. Something new. Callum. My name, but not in my voice. In a voice that sounded like it was trying to become mine. Halfway there. Not quite right, but closer than before. I shook my head slowly, backing up again, my hand sliding along the wall behind me. "No," I said. The figure didn't repeat it, didn't copy it. It just watched. And then it raised its hand, slowly, carefully, mirroring something I hadn't even realized I'd done. My own hand lifted slightly in response before I could stop it. And in that moment, we were the same posture, same movement, same shape in the dim light. My chest tightened painfully, because I understood then it didn't just want to sound like me, it wanted to be me. Another whistle, long, drawn out from outside. The figure didn't look away this time, didn't react to it. It stayed focused on me, completely. And then very softly it said, "Open the door." Not as a command, not as a demand, as a suggestion. My voice, perfect now. No delay, no distortion. My stomach dropped because that meant it was ready. Ready for what? I didn't know. But I had a feeling it wasn't good. I shook my head again, more firmly this time. "I'm not." The words caught in my throat because something moved in the reflection of the glass, behind it, outside. Another shape, closer to the door now, waiting. And suddenly, I realized something worse than anything else so far. The one outside wasn't trying to get in anymore. It didn't need to, because the one inside, was about to take its place. The moment that thought hit me, it's trying to take my place. Everything snapped into a kind of horrible clarity. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. This was a process. The one outside had tried first. The voice, the knocking, the request. Let me in. And when I didn't, something else had already been inside. Learning, watching, becoming. My chest tightened so sharply it hurt. No, I said again, more forcefully this time, shaking my head. The figure didn't react the way a person would. No frustration, no anger, just a slight pause, a recalculation. Then it stepped closer, close enough now that if I reached out, I could have touched it. I didn't, I couldn't, because the closer it got, the more wrong it became. Not less, more. My face almost was too still. The eyes locked in a way that didn't blink often enough. The mouth held shape between movements like it had to remember to relax. And the smell, I hadn't noticed it before. Now I did. Damp, stale, like old water trapped somewhere it shouldn't be. It lifted its hand again, higher this time, level with my own face. I flinched, pulling back instinctively. It mirrored the movement, but slower, delayed, like it was still catching up. Callum, it said again. Perfect. That was the worst part. There was no difference now, no distortion, no delay. If I'd heard that voice from outside, I wouldn't have questioned it. And that meant someone else wouldn't either. A cold, sick realization settled in my stomach. It doesn't just want me, it wants to leave as me. Behind it, the door creaked slightly, not opening, just shifting, like pressure had been applied to it from the outside. I glanced past the figure without meaning to, and saw it, another shape, right up against the glass, head tilted, watching, waiting. That one didn't speak, didn't move. It just stood there, patient, like it already knew how this was going to end. I snapped my attention back to the one in front of me. Stay away, I said, my voice tight now, barely holding together. It didn't repeat me, didn't mimic. It just smiled again, more naturally this time. Too naturally. Like it had learned that expression from somewhere real, from someone real, from me. My stomach turned. No, I whispered. The figure leaned slightly closer, not aggressively, not suddenly, just enough to close the gap. I could feel it now, the cold coming off it, not like normal body heat, the opposite, like standing near something that had never been warm to begin with. Then it spoke again, quiet, careful, almost reassuring. I'll go instead. My breath caught. The words hung there between us, simple, clear, and absolutely wrong. I'll go instead. Not let me in, not open the door. It had moved past that. This wasn't about entry anymore, it was about replacement. Behind it, the shape at the door shifted slightly, still silent, still waiting, like it didn't need to rush, like this part was already decided. I shook my head again, backing into the wall fully now, nowhere left to go. You're not going anywhere, I said. The figure tilted its head, studying the words, processing. Then it stepped even closer, close enough now that the torchlight slipped past it, casting both of our shadows onto the wall behind. And for a split second, the shadows didn't match. Mine moved, its didn't, or it moved differently, out of sync. I felt something twist inside my chest. That was it. That was the final confirmation. Whatever this was, it wasn't bound by the same rules. Not light, not space, not movement. And if it could copy my voice and my face and my shape, then what was stopping it from stepping out of that door as me? Another whistle came from outside, long, low. And this time, the figure didn't ignore it. It responded, not by whistling, by speaking. Soft, clear, in my voice, ready. The word made my stomach drop, because it wasn't for me. It was for whatever was outside. The shape at the door shifted again, closer, pressing in. The handle twitched slightly, and the figure in front of me took one final step forward. Closing the distance completely, we were face to face now, close enough that I could see every detail, every wrong detail, every almost correct feature. And then it reached out, not fast, not violently, just reaching. For my face, I reacted without thinking. I shoved it, hard. My hands hit its shoulders, expecting resistance, expecting weight. But there was almost nothing there. It gave way too easily, too smoothly, like pushing through something that hadn't fully settled into being solid. It stumbled back, but not naturally. Not like a person losing balance, more like it adjusted itself mid-motion, correcting, relearning. Its head snapped slightly to one side, then back to me. Eyes locking on again, and this time there was something new. Not anger, not pain, something worse, understanding. You don't want this, it said. Still my voice, still perfect. But now, there was intention behind it. I shook my head, breath coming fast now. No, I said. It tilted its head again. Then softly, almost gently, that's all right. My stomach dropped because of how it said it. Not like it was giving up, like it was adjusting the plan. Behind it, the door creaked again. Louder this time, and for the first time, the handle began to turn. On its own. The handle didn't snap down. It didn't jerk or rattle like someone trying to force their way in. It turned slowly, deliberately, as if whatever was on the other side knew exactly how much pressure to use and exactly how long to take. I felt something inside me drop, cold, heavy, because up until that moment, there had still been some kind of boundary. The door, the wall, a line between inside and outside, between me and them. Now that line was disappearing. No, I said, sharper this time, my voice cracking despite everything. The figure in front of me didn't look back at the door, didn't even acknowledge it. It stayed focused on me, completely, like the door didn't matter anymore, like it didn't need to. Because whatever was about to come through wasn't the real danger. It was. The handle clicked, a small sound, quiet, but in that room, it was deafening. The door shifted, just slightly, the seal breaking. A thin line of darker darkness opening along the frame. Cold air slid in immediately, sharper than before, damp, carrying that same stagnant smell, but stronger now, heavier, like it had been waiting just outside. My chest tightened. Don't, I whispered, though I wasn't even sure who I was saying it to anymore. The door opened another inch, then another. No rush, no force, just that same steady, controlled movement. And still, the figure in front of me didn't turn, didn't react. It just watched me, waiting. I realized then it wasn't trying to stop it, it was letting it happen, because it didn't need to be the one outside anymore. Another inch. The gap widened enough that I could see through it, just a sliver, a thin slice of the clearing beyond, and something standing there, close, right up against the door, too close to make out fully, just a shape, a presence, blocking what little light remained, watching. I stepped back instinctively, my shoulder pressing harder into the wall. No, I said again, louder now. The figure in front of me finally moved, not toward the door, toward me. One slow step, closing the space again. You don't have to stay, it said. My voice perfect, calm, almost comforting. The words hit differently this time. Not a command, not even a suggestion, an offer. And that was worse, because part of me, a small dangerous part, understood what it meant. If I left, if I stepped out, if I crossed that threshold, it would stay inside as me. And the thought twisted something deep in my chest, because that meant there was a way out. But it wasn't really escape, it was trade. I shook my head hard, pushing the thought away. No, I said again, that's not, no. The door creaked wider, the gap now big enough for something to pass through. But nothing did. It stayed there, waiting. The shape outside didn't move forward, didn't step in. It just stood there, patient, like it already knew what the outcome would be. The figure in front of me tilted its head slightly, watching my reaction, learning. Then, softly, "You're tired." The words landed in a way that made my stomach twist. Because they were true, not physically, not just that. Something deeper. A kind of mental exhaustion that had been building since the moment I stepped into those woods. The confusion, the fear, the constant second guessing. It had worn me down, and it knew it. "You don't have to do this," it continued. Still my voice, still calm, reasonable. "You can just walk out." My breathing hitched slightly. The door behind it stood open now, fully, the clearing visible beyond. Dark, empty, still. No figure in the frame anymore, just space, just an exit. My mind raced, just walk out, just leave. That's what I wanted from the beginning. That's what I've been trying to do this entire time. But now that option didn't feel right. It felt arranged, like it had been prepared, set up. For me, the figure took another small step closer, close enough that I could see the reflection of the torchlight in its eyes, close enough that it felt like looking into a distorted version of myself. "You don't have to stay here," it said again. And then, quieter, "I can." My chest tightened painfully, because that was the truth of it. That was the trade. It would stay. It would take my place. And I would leave, but not as me. Something shifted in my head then. Not panic, not fear. Something sharper, clearer. Because up until now, I'd been reacting, running, trying to understand, trying to survive. But this was the first time I saw it for what it was. Not just something chasing me, not just something copying me, something negotiating, something that needed something specific. Me, not just physically, not just my voice, my choice. It couldn't just take it, it needed me to give it. And that meant I still had control. Not much, but enough. I took a slow breath, forced my hands to steady, forced my thoughts to align. And then I did the one thing I hadn't tried yet. I stopped responding completely. No words, no movement, no reaction. I lowered the torch slightly, kept my eyes on it, but gave it nothing else. The figure paused, just slightly. The first hesitation I'd seen from it, it tilted its head again. Smaller movement this time, more precise, watching, waiting. But now, there was something different. A flicker, uncertainty. It spoke again. Callum. I didn't answer, didn't react, didn't even blink. Another second passed. Then another. The air in the room shifted, subtle, but noticeable, like something had lost its rhythm. The figure's posture changed, just slightly, less certain, less controlled, then stopped halfway. The movement unfinished, like it wasn't sure what to do next. Behind it, the door remained open, but the presence outside didn't move, didn't enter, still waiting, still watching. But now, so was I. And for the first time, I realized something that made everything shift again. They weren't in control, not completely, because if they were, this would already be over. Instead, they were waiting for me. And I wasn't giving them anything. I didn't move straight away. Even after it was gone, really gone, I stayed exactly where I was, back against the wall, torch held low, eyes fixed on the corner where it had been. Because I didn't trust it. Didn't trust the silence. Didn't trust the fact that everything suddenly felt normal. Or at least closer to normal than it had any right to. My breathing was still uneven, my chest tight from everything that had just happened, but slowly, very slowly, it started to settle. The cold in the room felt like ordinary cold again. The air, though still damp, no longer pressed in on me the same way. And most importantly, there was nothing else there. No second shadow, no movement, no presence just beyond sight. Just me, alone. I swallowed, my throat dry, and finally pushed myself off the wall. All right, I whispered, more to ground myself than anything else. The words sounded small in the empty room. Normal. I took a cautious step forward, then another. The corner stayed empty. The wall behind it just scratched concrete again. The words still carved deep, but no longer seeming to pulse with the same weight they had before. Don't whistle back. It learns you. I glanced at them briefly, then forced myself to look away. I didn't want to think about what would have happened if I'd reacted differently, if I'd answered, if I'd opened the door, if I'd let it finish whatever it had started. A sharp, quiet creak came from behind me. I turned instinctively. The door, it was nearly closed now. Not slammed, not forced, just resting slightly ajar. The gap was small, only a few inches, but enough to let in a faint sliver of the clearing beyond. Dark, still, empty. I hesitated, because stepping outside, that felt like crossing another line. But staying inside didn't feel right either, not anymore. The hut wasn't safe. It had never been safe. It had just been contained. I took a slow breath, then stepped toward the door. Each movement felt deliberate now, measured, like I was testing the space with every step. I reached the threshold, stopped, listened. Nothing, no whistles, no voices, no footsteps, just the faint, distant sound of water shifting somewhere out in the basin. I pushed the door open gently. It moved easily this time. No resistance, no hesitation. The clearing lay in front of me, exactly as it had been before, only now it felt different. Less oppressive, less aware, but not safe. Not completely. I stepped out. The cold hit me immediately, sharper now after being inside. The air smelled the same, wet, stagnant, but without that underlying pressure. I turned slowly, scanning the area, the waterline, the reeds, the trees beyond. Nothing moved, no figures, no shapes, no signs of anything watching. But that didn't mean they weren't there. It just meant they weren't present. Not in the same way. I tightened my grip on the torch and turned back toward the direction I thought the track had been. The path. That was all that mattered now. Find it, follow it, get out. I started walking. Slow at first, careful, testing each step. The ground was still soft near the basin, but it firmed up as I moved further away, the reeds giving way to patchy grass, then to the darker, more solid earth beneath the trees. The forest closed in around me again, but this time, it felt like a normal forest. Not completely, not entirely, but closer. The silence was still there, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It felt like the kind of quiet you'd expect in a place like this at night. Almost. I kept moving, didn't look back, didn't stop. The torchlight stayed steady now, fixed ahead, guiding me between the trees. Minutes passed, or what felt like minutes. Time still didn't feel entirely reliable. But eventually, I saw it, the track, clear, defined, exactly as it should have been. The same worn line through the trees I'd walked down earlier. Relief hit me so suddenly it almost made my knees give. There, I breathed. I stepped onto it quickly, turning slightly to orient myself. Back toward the road, back toward the car, back toward something normal. I didn't hesitate this time. I started walking, then faster, then almost jogging. My breath came quicker again, but not from panic this time, from urgency, from the need to put distance between me and that place. The trees blurred slightly at the edges of my vision as I moved, the torchlight bouncing but still controlled. No footsteps followed, no whistles echoed, no voices called out, just my own movement, my own breath, my own heartbeat. And then, ahead, a shape, low, solid, familiar. My car, parked exactly where I'd left it. The sight of it hit me harder than anything else so far. Real, concrete, unchanged. I slowed as I approached, my chest tightening again, but this time from something closer to relief. "You're fine," I muttered. "You're out." I reached the door, pulled it open, got in, locked it immediately. The sound of the lock clicking into place was the most reassuring thing I'd heard all night. I sat there for a second, hands still on the wheel, breathing hard, trying to let everything settle. The forest outside looked normal, dark, still, empty. No movement, no shapes, nothing watching. I let out a long breath, then reached for the ignition. The engine turned over, started. The familiar sound grounded me instantly. I didn't waste another second. I pulled away from the verge and drove. The track out seemed shorter this time. Or maybe I just didn't notice it, didn't care. All that mattered was getting back to the road, back to somewhere with light, with people, with anything that made sense. And when I finally hit the main road, when the headlights of passing cars lit up the windscreen, when the world snapped back into something normal, that was when I realized something I hadn't thought about until that moment. I hadn't heard a whistle since I left the hut. Not one, not a single sound. And for the first time, I let myself believe it was over, at least for now. I didn't go home straight away. That's something I didn't realize until later, when I tried to piece the night back together properly. At the time, I just drove. No direction, no plan, just away. Away from the trees, away from the basin, away from that hut and everything inside it. The road blurred past in long stretches of dark hedgerows and empty lanes, the occasional passing car flashing light across my windscreen before disappearing again. It all felt distant, unreal, like I was still half inside that place, waiting for something to break through. I kept checking the mirrors every few seconds, rear view, side mirrors, back again. Nothing, just darkness behind me, just the empty road. Still, I didn't stop, not for a long time. Eventually, I pulled into a petrol station just outside Kendall. Bright lights, cameras, a couple of people inside by the counter. Normal, safe. The kind of place where nothing like that could possibly happen. I parked near the entrance, engine still running, and just sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing, letting the normality settle in. "You're fine," I said quietly. "You're out." I said it a few times, each time sounding a little more convincing. Eventually, I killed the engine and stepped out. The cold air hit me again, but it felt different now. Clean, familiar, nothing hidden in it. I walked inside, grabbed a bottle of water, paid without really thinking, barely making eye contact with the cashier. I must have looked rough, mud on my boots, clothes damp at the edges, but no one said anything. No one looked twice. That helped. A lot. Because it meant I looked normal. I felt normal, at least on the outside. I got back in the car, sat there for another minute, then finally drove home. The flat felt exactly as I'd left it, warm, quiet, safe. I locked the door behind me twice, then stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. No movement, no sound, just the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I let out a long breath. "Done," I muttered, and for the first time since I'd stepped into those woods, I believed it. I didn't sleep properly that night, not because I was scared something would happen, more because my head wouldn't stop replaying everything. The runner, the whistles, the hut, the figure, the voice, my voice, over and over again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. standing there, looking at me, becoming me. I must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I remember clearly was waking up. Late morning, gray light filtering through the curtains. For a moment, everything felt normal again, like it had been a bad dream, like I'd imagined it. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting that thought settle. Just stress, I murmured, that's all. It almost worked, until I heard it, from somewhere in the flat, a soft sound, barely audible, but unmistakable, a whistle, low, short, the exact same tone. My entire body went cold. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. I just lay there listening, waiting. It didn't come again. The silence stretched, heavy, familiar, too familiar. Slowly, carefully, I sat up. The flat looked the same, nothing out of place, nothing moved, but something felt wrong, not like before, not overwhelming, not suffocating, just present. Subtle, close. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet hitting the floor. Cold, normal. I stood, walked toward the door, each step slow, measured, controlled. I opened it. The hallway was empty, kitchen door open, living room still. Nothing there, no one. I swallowed hard. You're imagining it, I whispered, but the words didn't carry any weight, because I knew what I'd heard. I moved further to the flat, checking each room. Bathroom, kitchen, empty. Living room, empty. Everything exactly as it should have been. I stopped, because something wasn't right. Small, easy to miss, but there, on the inside of the front door, just below the handle, a smear, dark, dragged downward, like something had pressed there and slipped. My chest tightened. No, I said quietly. I stepped closer. The mark looked fresh, wet. I didn't touch it, didn't want to, because I already knew that hadn't been there before. A sound came from behind me, soft, close, too close. I froze, my breath caught my throat. Slowly, I turned. The hallway behind me stood empty, still, silent, but the air felt different, charged, waiting. And then, from somewhere deeper in the flat, a voice, quiet, careful, perfect. Callum, my blood ran cold, because this time it wasn't coming from outside, and I knew with absolute certainty I had not come home alone. If this story stirred something within you, be it a flicker of unease, curiosity, or deep reflection, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think is truly going on? Have you ever experienced a sense of uncanny familiarity like that before? If you have similar stories of your own, don't hesitate to share them. Who knows? Maybe we are all touching upon the same hidden frequency. And if you want to keep exploring these dramatic, mysterious, and multi-layered tales, please hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming chapters. Wishing you a truly peaceful night, where everything is still in the gentlest way, and may there always be a spark of warm light somewhere, waiting for you to find it.